Well, hello there, watching the press preview. A first look then at what is on the front pages. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with the journalist and author Christina Patterson and the columnist at the article, Ali Miraj. Great to see both of you. As ever, though, we'll start with the front pages and the Observer focusing on the Prime Minister's deepening twin political crises amid pressure on COVID deals and the row over so-called Tory sleaze reaching new heights. The Sunday Times is reporting on an investigation into the Conservative Party offering seats in the House of Lords to multimillionaire donors who have given large sums to the party. The Sunday Express leads with an exclusive on the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss's vision for Britain as it declares it's time to deliver jobs of the future. People power is essential because politicians just talk and do nothing, reads the Scotland on Sunday, as COP26 climate protests take place in Glasgow and around the world. The Telegraph has seen leaked papers which show that ministers are prepared to walk away from major EU research programmes if Brussels plays hardball over the Northern Ireland Borders Protocol. And the Mail leading with an exclusive as they say that ministers plan on bringing back tests and quarantine for those who refuse to take the booster jab. Why every mum should get jab headlines the Sunday People with a story about a baby girl whose mum has died from COVID just as she was born. The Mirror leading with a nurse who claims to have had a relationship with David Fuller, the man who abused corpses while working in a morgue. While the Star on Sunday has a story about Strictly Come Dancing star AJ Adudu and his new partner on the show. So, Christina Patterson and Ali Miraj are here. Quite a mixed set of headlines, has to be said. But Ali, talk us through the Observer, first of all, with the continuing repercussions of that vote in Parliament last week and the subsequent resignation of Owen Patterson.
Well, yes, Anna, this debacle continues with the Observer now reporting that the organisations that Owen Patterson was lobbying for actually secured up to £500 million worth of contracts, government contracts. So this story rumbles on, and it's a very, very sorry saga for the government, and particularly the Prime Minister here, to have got himself into. This is, people will remember back in the mid-1990s, the Cash for Questions saga. They'll also remember the Cash for Peerages saga under Tony Blair. So governments of various stripes have got themselves into trouble on this. But this is beginning to now, the government has to be careful about having this whiff around it of just making up the rules as it wishes. John Major was very vociferous earlier today, saying that the government is, in certain essences, politically corrupt, and was being very, very strong on this. Obviously, he's a Remainer, doesn't like the government because they're Brexiteers. But you also have to go back to the fact that Jonathan Jones, the government head of the legal service, resigned in 2020 over the fact that the government was going to ride roughshod over the withdrawal agreement. And you had Alex Allen, the advisor on the ministerial code, resign on the back of the Prime Minister ignoring his recommendations over bullying allegations in relation to Priti Patel. So the government's got form on this, and the Prime Minister needs to get a grip. Because if you're a backbencher in the Tory party right now, you'd be scratching your head wondering why you would go and back for the government again when you're going to have your legs cut from underneath you within 24 hours when they throw you under the bus.
Yes, I mean, certainly Sir John Major calling the whole episode shameful, other leader writing pieces suggesting the pillars of democracy being chipped away. And yet Christopher Hope from the Daily Telegraph saying actually the government was trying to do the right thing here, first of all giving MPs a right of reply effectively. And there was a lot of sympathy for Mr Patterson, obviously, after what happened to his wife, the two therefore conflated together. So wherever your sympathies lie, where does it leave both the question marks now over the government and what they do about this vote that they've had they need to unpick, or do they, Christina?
Well, I think the fact that, I mean, they are certainly in a pickle, and it's much more than a pickle, actually. I'm sure anybody would have sympathy with someone whose wife has committed suicide. That's an absolute tragedy, and anyone's heart would go out to Owen Patterson or anyone in that situation. I think, unfortunately, maybe it's the grief. The most charitable light one can cast on this is that the grief has overshadowed his judgment, because he was found to have committed egregious, was the word used in the report, egregious breaches of the code. There is very little question. The evidence is very damning, and what's not clear is whether they were just wanting to get Owen Patterson off the hook, or if they were actually wanting to overhaul the whole system. Possibly, it has been argued, because Boris Johnson knows that he is likely to face further investigations over Curtain Gate and Gold Wallpaper Gate and all the other gates that involve unbelievably expensive and dubiously funded interior decor at Downing Street. And maybe he was trying to make sure that he didn't get a harsh judgment on that. We don't know. What we do know is that the word corruption and sleaze has been used extensively this week. And I think I was probably one of many, many people who felt that John Major's interview this morning was quite cathartic. I went to bed profoundly depressed the other night when Parliament had voted to abolish the rule makers and decide they were going to make the rules themselves. That was a real nadir, even in a country that has seen a lot of nadirs in recent years. And to have a former Tory Prime Minister who himself knows a thing or two about sleaze and who started the Nolan Committee and the Nolan Principles of Public Life as a result of that, to hear his words talking about the corruption of this government, it was some relief, because I think some of us feel we've been going mad in the last few years.
Yeah, and certainly many people pointing out that Sir John Major is no fan of Boris Johnson or anything that he has achieved, namely Brexit, of course. So that's been certainly a part of the mood music after that interview today. Ali, let's move on to the Sunday Times, shall we? New Tory sleaze rows, donors who pay £3 million get seats in the House of Lords. Well, we've had a statement from the Conservative Party, but, tell us about this story, because, it's not the first time it has been suggested that this might be what happens.
Well, I'm surprised it's news, Anna. I'm really surprised that it's news. I mean, parties of all political persuasions for a long time have been accused of doling out peerages to people who give cash. You've got a situation at the moment where Lord Fowler, the Speaker of the House of Lords, has been pleading with successive prime ministers to limit the number of people going into the upper chamber. There are now over 800 peers. If Vladimir Putin was stuffing the Duma with his cronies, we would be screaming blue murder. This is meant to be the mother of all parliaments, and we have a situation here where mates of the prime minister, successive prime ministers, goes back to Labour as well. In 06-07, there was a police investigation into the Labour Party on their part, also supposedly doling out cash for peerages. So this is not just a Conservative Party issue. You've got a situation where you can end up in the legislature for life by giving money to the party. Look, if you want to reward political donors, there's an honour system to do that. There are other ways of doing it. You don't have to give them a seat in the legislature for life. And frankly, in its current form, I think the Lords is becoming increasingly untenable. It plays a very important function in our democracy, the House of Lords. It's good that they're not elected, but in its present form, it's really coming into disrepute and becoming a bit of a joke. So this is a long-running saga. I think it needs to be looked at thoroughly, and it's something that affects all parties and needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I mean, you've picked on the article, or the paragraph, rather, in the Sunday Times article that I noticed, which is the alleged use of seats in the Lords as an arm of party fundraising is particularly controversial because, unlike other honours, like knighthoods, peers fulfil an important role in the legislative process as a check and balance for new laws. So, as you say, it has implications. The story then that the Conservative Party was systematically offering seats in the Lords to a select group of multimillionaire donors who pay more than £3 million to the party, £3 million. They have issued a statement to us tonight. We do not believe that successful business people and philanthropists who contribute to political causes and parties should be disqualified from sitting in the legislature. So that's that. I want to very quickly, if you don't mind, Christina, go to the protests we've seen in Glasgow and elsewhere today as negotiators hurriedly head back for week 2 after a day of rest on Sunday at the COP26 climate conference. It's been fascinating, hasn't it? The people power on the streets. Are they still as relevant as the money men inside who are seeking out means of investing now in renewable energy, do you think?
Well, I think they have helped to shift the dial. I'm not a fan of Extinction Rebellion. I don't like their methods. I don't like the fact that, for example, some of their protests have involved stopping cleaners in the East End getting to work by, leaping on tube trains and things like that. But without these global protests, we wouldn't be where we are now, and people like Boris Johnson would not have had their Damascene conversion from severe climate skepticism to apparently huge enthusiasm for action, but not obviously enough action to stop him leaping straight on a private jet to get back to a lovely dinner at the Garrick Club with Charles Moore. So, what we need is for people to actually do what they say they will do and not be hypocrites. And it would be lovely if our government could perhaps set an example on that front rather than, still jetting around the world. I think Boris Johnson was on a private jet just a couple of weeks ago. In fact, possibly last week. I think he's on private jets most week, actually. And given that there are generally seats available on other flights, it doesn't seem like, a great look. But broadly speaking, there have been moves on deforestation, which could be very significant. The very fact that India has committed to net zero by 2070 is huge. Obviously, that's a long way away, but it's much better than might have been expected. So that there is some good news here, and now we need to take the action, which will be uncomfortable and difficult for many people, and expensive is one of the key points. So today, I think yesterday, the governor of the Bank of England was saying gas is going to go up partly because of the cutting back on fossil fuels, and it's all very well to say I'm in favour of action, but when it hits your wallet, that's often a different matter.